CBS News investigation found it is ripe for fraud, especially in California.
Yep, you can't throw a rock without hitting a hospice.
Hundreds of red flagged providers vanishing overnight.
This was what we refer to as ground zero. That building is considered ground zero because it just was so blatant.
Hospice, home health agency, hospice.
Can you come back?
Just looking at this directory, you can see dozens of hospice agencies coming up.
According to our analysis, 72 of the 89 registered hospices in Merabi Plaza have at least 3 of those potential warning signs.
89 hospice companies, one building in Van Nuys, California. Not a hospital, not a medical campus, a 3-story stucco office building with a salon and a modeling agency inside. And CBS News just walked in and found out what we've been talking about for weeks on this channel. Fraud is everywhere, not just in Minnesota. It's systematic and our tax dollars are funding it all. Let's get into it. So the last couple of days, CBS News dropped a lot of investigative pieces on this situation. So correspondent Adam Yamaguchi and reporter Graham Case go to this place, this medical plaza in Los Angeles. And let me just tell you, it is completely ridiculous.
This was what we refer to as ground zero. That building is considered ground zero because it just was so blatant.
This building, our investigation found, is home to 89 registered hospice companies.
And this particular building, I noticed, I'm like, dang, how can there be that many licensed and certified hospices in this tiny little building?
We went to the Van Nuys address to find out what's going on.
89 in one building. And this woman, Sheila Clark, a hospice patient advocate, has been raising an alarm on this for years. Regardless of where the location is, whether it's in Maine or Minnesota or Washington, there are people that were screaming about this for years and not really getting any type of attention. Definitely not from the politicians. Local news stories will cover this type of thing. It just doesn't get enough attention nationally. So she's not new to this. She's been screaming into the void. Now CBS finally showing up with some cameras. And this gets worse. CBS analyzed the data and found that 72 of those 89 hospice companies had at least 3 of the fraud warning signs that California's own state auditors define. Things like clustering multiple agencies in one building, low patient counts, high rates of terminally ill patients magically just getting discharged alive, excessive billing, and staff shared across multiple companies. Watch what happens when they walk inside.
We're gonna try to go in and see what we can find. Here's the directory. Hospice, home health agency, hospice.
Can you come back?
Just looking at this directory, you can see dozens of hospice agencies coming up.
The state and federal records for hospice agencies tell you a lot.
This isn't possible. It made no sense because I know what a licensed and certified hospice looks like.
She said it made no sense because it doesn't make any sense unless you understand this is not healthcare. This is fraud. This is a billing scheme. Federal inspectors visit those suites in that building between 2021 and 2025. They documented nearly 400 violations. At one hospice, a nurse wrote that the patient's family was satisfied with the care. Inspectors found nobody from the hospice ever even visited the patient. At another one, the patient's chart listed medications for malaria and diabetes. The patient told inspectors he wasn't taking either one of those medications. At the same company, a social worker wrote about a family grieving the death of their loved one. There was no evidence that that patient actually died. Let me say that again. A social worker wrote about a family grieving the death of their loved one. There was no evidence that the patient was actually dead. They wrote a grief note for someone that was still alive. That is fraud. It is not a paperwork error. It's fraud. Now let's zoom out because the numbers here are just staggering. California's own state auditor flagged this back in 2022. LA County had 1,500% increase in hospice companies since 2010. That's 6 times more hospice providers per elderly person than the national average. LA County alone has roughly 1,800 hospice providers. 742 of them are showing fraud indicators as defined by California's own auditors. Dr. Oz, who now leads the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, told CBS that the estimated fraud could total $3.5 billion annually in Los Angeles alone. That is 10 to 15% of all Medicare hospice spending. Billion with a B. Also, we have to talk about the human cost that people miss when we talk about numbers. CBS found a 69-year-old woman who was denied coverage for physical therapy because Medicaid records show that she was dying in a hospice. She wasn't in a hospice. Listen to this.
69-year-old Dr. Lynn Iani just ran me up and down the pickleball court. But 2 years ago, she was, according to Medicare records, dying in hospice care.
I was in treatment as physical therapy, simply, because I had had a kind of an injury on the pickleball court. The administrator at the office was like, they're not going to pay any of your claims. And I was shocked. They said, you're in hospice. And I said, what? What are you talking about? Are you kidding me? Do I look like I'm in hospice? She goes, no, I know you.
What were the medical consequences?
I was terrified. I mean, something can happen. That's why you have health insurance of any kind. And just to think you're literally without coverage because of some ridiculous fraudulent thing.
This woman out here playing pickleball, and I don't know how to play pickleball, but she's out there moving around, and Medicare thought that she was on her deathbed. Someone stole her Medicare number and enrolled her without her knowledge. That is not a statistic. That's a senior citizen being denied care because some scammer used her identity to build a government. It's what we see in Minnesota with the Feeding Our Future scams. It's the pattern of exploiting the government program designed to help vulnerable people set up shell corporations and operations, bill for services that were never provided, and then count on a system being too slow, too underfunded, or too negligent to catch them. So who's accountable for all this? And what happens to real patients when these operations just vanish overnight?
Yep, you can't throw a rock without hitting a hospice.
How does that make you feel?
Real patients being denied care.
Really sad, because I talk to them every day. I'm sorry.
That's someone who actually cares about these people. They're dying. She's breaking down because this system is supposed to protect them is being looted.
State Attorney General Rob Bonta says his office has brought hospice fraud criminal cases against 109 defendants and about 24 civil cases.
What would you say to citizens who are throwing up their hands and saying, how long is this going to persist? Is my government doing anything to protect my taxpayer dollars?
Again, I share it. I have the frustration. So to the citizens that remain frustrated, I understand. I share your frustration.
I mean, yes, it's great that Attorney General said this is unacceptable. Okay, but what are you going to do about it? California put a moratorium on new hospice licenses in 2021 and revoked over 280 licenses. But if you still have 742 companies showing fraud flags and 89 registered into one building with nearly 400 federal violations, the moratorium is not working. It's not enough. Dr. Oz says that CMS has shifted from verifying claims before issuing payments, which is great. I mean, that should have been the default since day one. And with this building owner here, listen to this exchange.
When we went back to Merabi Plaza, we found the building's owner, Kambiz Merabi.
I have vacancies. Tenant would come in as long as they're legit.
Yeah.
They have valid things that we need. Mm-hmm. I rent. I'm not a police or keeper of what they do, how they do business.
So from your perspective, they're licensed. That's obviously the first sort of barometer of, measuring whether it's a legit business or not.
Absolutely. And look, maybe state and the federal government, it's becoming restrict on many businesses, and I'm all for it, because at the end of the day, you and I are paying for all those things that are not right.
Merabi wouldn't let us walk the halls on our own to talk with hospice employees, but told us this about any possible fraud.
If you learn of hospices in your building that are accused of fraud,
I would immediately
you would get rid of them.
terminate.
Okay.
Yes.
But that hasn't happened yet.
No, no one has ever come to me, tell me that, okay, this or that is doing fraud.
This man is going to say that no one has ever told him about fraud. Meanwhile, he told CBS that Medicaid officials came to his building 2 years ago looking for hospice agencies. So the feds were there. They saw it, and it's still happening. I'm just happy that national media coverage is going into CBS for covering this. Mainstream news putting resources behind this story is a win. And we can't forget the person who pushed needle. Nick Shirley, a dude in his 20s, an independent journalist, went viral when he went to Minnesota looking at all the daycare fraud and investigation that brought a lot of attention to this issue. Millions of views, testified before Congress. Then earlier this week, he drops his video on California claiming over $170 million in hospice and daycare fraud. Empty offices, luxury cars outside, operators panicking on camera, gaining millions of views across multiple platforms. And I want to talk about Governor Gavin Newsom. What is his response on all this?
Shirley claims his latest expose uncovers $170 million in suspected hospice and Medicare fraud in California alone. In his video, Shirley points out luxury cars in parking lots near hospice facilities, and few people are willing to speak to him, reason Shirley claims back up his claims. Shirley's California visit prompted this post by California Governor Gavin Newsom's press office featuring a meme of Shirley at a daycare covered in cameras and asking, "Hey, can I see your kids?" Shirley argues that the state should welcome efforts like his.
I mean, if I was the governor, I would be happy that the fraud was exposed and then figuring out how to crack down on this fraud. Instead, he attacked the journalist who exposed the fraud.
Not an investigation, not accountability. His official press office posted a meme of Nick Shirley as a predator lurking outside a daycare. The governor's response to fraud being exposed in his state was to attack the journalist. Even Democratic Senator John Fetterman called this out, saying fraud is fraud regardless of what state is in. That situation tells you everything, especially when I think that Gavin Newsom is going to try to run for president. How can you attack someone uncovering fraud in your state and think that's okay? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But the good news is that the dam is breaking. Independent creators have pushed this into the spotlight and now the mainstream outlets are following it. That's how it's supposed to work. We covered the Feeding Our Future stuff. We covered Minnesota fraud networks, talking about the Medicaid scams in Maine. We covered the politicians protecting the people doing it. And we're going to continue to cover it. And if you're interested in this type of content, if you got to this point, appreciate you. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the hype button, all that good stuff. Let me know what you guys think about this story in the comments below. Thank you for taking time to watch this video. And I'll see you guys in the next video.